This morning's operation was carried out safely and successfully.
52 a.m. Washington, D.C. The secure operations floor at FBI headquarters had been dark for hours, but the command center never slept. Deputy Director Marcus Henshaw stood before a wall of monitors displaying satellite feeds, surveillance footage, and encrypted communications streams. His phone vibrated once. The message contained 2 words: package secured. After 10 years, 462 investigative leads, deployments across 17 countries, and the coordinated efforts of 6 federal agencies, the manhunt was over. Gabriel Moreno Vasquez, number 4 on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, was in custody. The charges were staggering: racketeering, conspiracy, interstate murder for hire, narcotics trafficking resulting in death, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, and conspiracy to commit money laundering through operations spanning 3 continents. The bounty on his head had reached $5 million. His network had moved an estimated 240 tons of narcotics into the United States over 8 years. 14 bodies were directly connected to his orders. His capture location would shock even seasoned agents: a fortified compound 12 miles outside Puerto Vallarta, disguised as a luxury beachfront resort, protected by corrupted local police, and equipped with surveillance technology that rivaled some government installations. What followed would expose not just one fugitive, but an entire shadow apparatus that had kept him invisible for a decade. The investigation did not begin with Moreno. It began with a missing woman. September 2014, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Cristina Herrera, 26 years old, 8 months pregnant, vanished from a grocery store parking lot in broad daylight. Surveillance cameras captured her entering her vehicle. She never arrived home. Her fiancé reported her missing within 2 hours. Local police treated it as a standard missing person case until her vehicle was discovered 3 days later in a ravine 40 miles outside the city, doors open, engine cold, interior wiped clean. No blood. No fingerprints, no witnesses. What made seasoned detectives uneasy was not what they found, but what they did not find. Her phone, her purse, her wedding ring, she never removed. The case went cold within weeks, filed among thousands of unsolved disappearances that haunt federal databases. But Cristina's brother, Miguel Herrera, was a DIA intelligence analyst stationed in El Paso. He could not let it go. He began pulling reports, cross-referencing databases, tracking patterns that connected his sister's disappearance to something far larger. What he uncovered was not random violence. It was calculated elimination. Miguel identified 17 similar disappearances across New Mexico, Arizona, and West Texas between 2012 and 2014. All women, all connected, however distantly, to men who had worked in cross-border logistics, trucking, or freight forwarding. All vanished without physical evidence. The pattern suggested professional abduction, the kind conducted by organizations with resources, discipline, and reach. Miguel brought his findings to his supervisors. The DIA opened a preliminary investigation. They assigned the case to a joint task force that included FBI violent crimes, ICE Homeland Security investigations, and U.S. Marshals Service fugitive apprehension teams. The task force designated the investigation Operation Phantom Chain. Lead investigator was FBI Special Agent Caroline Driscoll, a 15-year veteran with a specialty in organized crime infiltration. She recognized the signature immediately. The disappearances were not about the women. They were about sending messages to the men, connected to them. This was cartel enforcement methodology, designed to ensure silence and compliance within a smuggling network that spanned from Sinaloa to Seattle. If you're still watching, tap like so more people see how a single missing person case unraveled an empire built on terror and corruption. Agent Driscoll's team began constructing a network map. They identified 47 freight companies operating along the I-10 and I-25 corridors with ownership structures that dissolved into shell corporations registered in Delaware, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands. Financial subpoenas revealed a complex money flow, trucking contracts paid by legitimate produce distributors, but secondary payments routed through intermediary accounts that fed back into cash-intensive businesses, car washes, check cashing stores, used car dealerships, nightclubs in El Paso, Tucson, and Albuquerque. The amounts were staggering. Between 2011 and 2015, an estimated $420 million moved through these channels. Ledgers seized from a storage unit in Las Cruces showed coded entries that corresponded to shipment weights and delivery dates. The codes matched DIA intelligence on narcotic seizures along the southern border. The task force realized they were not tracking a single operation. They were tracking the financial backbone of a transnational distribution network controlled by the Jalisco New Generation cartel, and the enforcer responsible for maintaining order in the U.S. network was Gabriel Moreno Vizquez. Moreno was not a street-level operator. His file read like a masterclass in criminal evolution. Born in Guadalajara in 1978, he entered cartel operations as a teenager, working logistics for the Milenio cartel before its fracture in the mid-2000s. When Junga emerged as the dominant force in Jalisco, Moreno rose through the ranks by demonstrating two qualities cartel leadership valued above all: ruthlessness and discretion. He orchestrated enforcement actions that eliminated rivals without triggering law enforcement attention. He managed cross-border operations with the precision of a Fortune 500 supply chain. By 2011, he was overseeing the entire U.S. distribution network west of the Mississippi. His base of operations was El Paso, where he lived under the identity of a successful real estate investor named Gabriel Morales. He drove a leased Mercedes. He attended charity events. He donated to local political campaigns. His neighbors described him as quiet, polite, generous. No one suspected that the man who hosted summer barbecues was responsible for coordinating murders, ordering abductions, and managing narcotic shipments that generated hundreds of millions in annual revenue. The Fade collapsed in June 2015. A coordinated DIA and FBI raid targeted 12 locations simultaneously across El Paso, Albuquerque, Phoenix, and Tucson. Agents executed warrants at Moreno's residence, 2 warehouse facilities, a trucking depot, and the offices of 5 shell companies tied to the smuggling network. The operation involved 230 federal agents supported by tactical teams from FBI HART and DEA Special Operations Division. The raids began at 5:18 a.m. Battering rams struck reinforced doors. Flashbangs disoriented occupants.
Measured in seconds, not casualties, but the message was unmistakable. Whoever built this place had anticipated a raid, and they had prepared to fight it. Once the perimeter was secured, the search began. Behind a false wall in the West Wing, agents uncovered the first cash vault, nearly $120 million in bundled cash, vacuum-sealed and stacked from floor to ceiling. In the basement, reinforced with poured concrete, they found container units disguised as mechanical equipment. Inside were 3.7 tons of narcotics, heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl, whose chemical signatures matched seizures made months earlier across the Midwest. At 5:50 a.m., Federal Command escalated the operation to a statewide level. As teams continued clearing the estate, simultaneous search warrants were activated across Minnesota. Warehouses, storage units, offices, rural property.
Painted a portrait of industrial-scale criminality. Agents recovered $2,100,000 in cash bundled in vacuum-sealed packages. They found 12 kilograms of methamphetamine, 43 kilograms of cocaine, and 27 kilograms of fentanyl stored in hidden compartments inside freight trailers. Encrypted phones contained communications with cartel leadership in Guadalajara, coordination messages for shipment schedules, and photographs documenting deliveries. Financial records showed wire transfers totaling $63 million routed through banks in Panama, Hong Kong, and Cyprus. The ledgers contain names, addresses, and payment amounts for individuals described as protectors and facilitators. Cross-referencing those entries with law enforcement databases revealed a conspiracy that extended beyond Moreno's smuggling network. It reached into police departments, border patrol stations, and even federal agencies. The task force had not just found a fugitive operation, They had uncovered systematic corruption that had allowed Moreno to operate with impunity for years. Moreno vanished. Within hours of the raid, he crossed into Mexico through a remote desert corridor east of Juarez, assisted by spotters and transporters who moved him through cartel-controlled territory. The FBI issued a federal warrant for his arrest. The State Department offered a $5 million reward. Moreno was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list in August 2015, joining a roster that included terrorists, serial killers, and crime bosses. Interpol issued a red notice. Mexican authorities opened their own investigation, though cooperation was complicated by the corruption Moreno's ledgers had exposed. The manhunt entered its most difficult phase, locating a fugitive who had wealth, connections, and protection within a country where cartel influence often exceeded government authority. For the task force, the question was not whether they would find Moreno. It was how long he could remain invisible while maintaining control over the criminal network that depended on his leadership. The answer was a very long time. Between 2015 and 2025, the task force pursued 462 leads. Analysts tracked financial movements through blockchain transactions and cryptocurrency wallets. Informants provided intelligence that placed Moreno in Guadalajara, Culiac, Mazatlan, and Canson at various times. Surveillance operations identified associates, family members, and financial intermediaries who maintained communication with him. The task force arrested 37 individuals connected to Moreno's network, dismantled smuggling routes, and seized assets worth $96 million. But Moreno himself remained beyond reach, moving between safe houses, changing identities, and relying on a security apparatus that insulated him from detection. The investigation became a test of endurance and patience, a chess match played across borders with stakes measured in lives lost to the narcotics Moreno's network continued to distribute. Every overdose death, every act of violence to his operation added weight to the case file that grew thicker with each passing year. Type justice below if you believe 10 years is too long for someone responsible for this much destruction to evade accountability. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. March 2025. A mid-level financial analyst working for a regional bank in Guadalajara contacted the FBI's legal attach office at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. The analyst, whose identity remains protected, reported suspicious transactions involving accounts held under corporate entities registered in Jalisco. The transactions were small, designed to avoid detection thresholds, but their frequency and pattern suggested structured money laundering. The analyst provided account numbers, transaction dates, and corporate registration documents. FBI financial crimes investigators ran the data through pattern recognition software that cross-referenced known shell companies and cartel financial infrastructure. The analysis identified connections to 3 entities previously linked to Moreno's network. The accounts had been active for 18 months, moving approximately $200,000 per month through layered transactions that obscured the ultimate recipient. But the digital trail, when fully mapped, pointed to a property management company in Puerto Vallarta that controlled several high-end vacation rentals and a private compound marketed as an exclusive executive retreat. The task force deployed resources immediately. FBI agents coordinated with Mexico's Fiscala General de la República and the Secretaría de Seguridad y Protección Ciudadana. Intelligence analysts began monitoring communications, financial flows, and movement in and out of the Puerto Vallarta property. Surveillance revealed that the compound was far more secure than a typical vacation rental. Perimeter walls topped with cameras, private security guards rotating in 12-hour shifts, vehicles entering and exiting at irregular hours, always with tinted windows and covered license plates. Thermal imaging detected multiple occupants inside the main residence, though identifying specific individuals was impossible without closer access. The task force faced a critical decision: move quickly with limited intelligence, risking operational failure, or conduct extended surveillance to confirm Moreno's presence, risking that he would relocate before they could act. The decision was made at the highest levels of the FBI and approved by the Department of Justice. They would execute a joint apprehension operation with Mexican federal forces. The window was narrow. The risks were high. Failure was not an option. Operation Phantom Chain entered its final phase. U.S. Marshals Service Special Operations Group deployed to Guadalajara, coordinating with FBI tactical teams and Mexican Federal Police, Grupos de Reacción. The operation involved 63 personnel, including surveillance specialists, tactical operators, intelligence analysts, and aviation support. The plan called for simultaneous raids on the Puerto Vallarta compound and 2 secondary locations in Guadalajara, believed to house Moreno's security personnel and financial operatives. The operation required precision timing, secure communications, and absolute operational security to prevent leaks that could warn Moreno and trigger another escape. Planning consumed 3 weeks. Teams conducted rehearsals using mock-ups of the compound based on satellite imagery and architectural records. Contingency plans addressed every scenario: armed resistance, hostage situations, escape attempts by vehicle or watercraft. The order to execute came on May 14, 2025. The target date was set for May 19. The operation would launch at dawn. 4:32 a.m. Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco. The sky was still dark. Humidity thick in the air. The ocean invisible beyond the compound walls. 3 vehicles approached from different directions. Headlights off. Engines barely audible. Mexican Federal Police secured the perimeter, blocking roads and establishing containment zones. FBI and U.S. Marshals tactical teams moved into position outside the compound's main gate. Overhead, a helicopter circled at altitude, thermal imaging tracking movement inside the residence. The operation commander gave the signal. Breaching charges detonated on the reinforced gate, the blast echoing across the quiet neighborhood. Tactical teams surged through the opening, moving with speed and precision. Security guards inside the compound dropped their weapons and surrendered immediately, recognizing the overwhelming force and the futility of resistance. Agents swept through the main residence, clearing rooms, securing occupants. In a second-floor bedroom overlooking the ocean, they found Gabriel Moreno Vasquez. He was awake, dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed as if he had been expecting them. No weapon, no attempt to flee. His expression was calm, almost resigned. Agents placed him in handcuffs, read his rights in Spanish, and escorted him downstairs. The compound was secured within 11 minutes. No shots fired, no injuries. The capture was textbook execution, the result of years of intelligence work, meticulous planning, and flawless coordination. Moreno was transported under heavy guard to a secure facility in Guadalajara, where he was processed for extradition to the United States. Within hours, the FBI issued a press release confirming his capture. The announcement made headlines across the United States and Mexico. For the families of victims, for the agents who had pursued him for a decade, for the communities ravaged by the violence and addiction his network had fueled, the news brought a measure of justice long delayed. But the capture was only the beginning of the reckoning. Agents conducting the raid on the Puerto Vallarta compound discovered evidence that would expand the investigation into new and darker territory. Inside a ground-floor office, they found a desktop computer, external hard drives, and file cabinets containing financial records, communications logs, and ledgers detailing 10 years of operations. Forensic analysts extracted data that revealed the full scope of Moreno's network, distribution cells in 23 U.S. cities, financial accounts in 14 countries, and payments to 147 individuals identified as facilitators, protectors, and corrupt officials. The ledgers listed names, titles, agencies, and badge numbers. The most damaging entries detailed payments to 3 U.S. Border Patrol agents, 2 ICE deportation officers, 5 municipal police officers across Arizona and New Mexico, and 2 individuals identified as federal informants who had been feeding Moreno intelligence on law enforcement operations. The corruption was not peripheral. It was embedded, systematic, and essential to Moreno's ability to evade capture for so long. If this shocks you, imagine what's still hidden in those files. Tap like to push this story further and demand full transparency. The evidence also documented the human cost of Moreno's operations with brutal clarity. Files contained photographs and biographical information on individuals targeted for elimination, including Cristina Herrera. Her case file was labeled neutralized, a clinical term for murder. The documents confirmed what investigators had suspected. Cristina had been killed because her fiancé, a freight dispatcher, had witnessed irregularities in shipment manifests and threatened to report them. Her murder was designed to silence him and send a message to others in the network. The file listed 13 other similar cases, each involving individuals who had become liabilities. The discovery brought Miguel Herrera a grim sense of closure, confirmation that his sister's death was not random but calculated, and that the man responsible was now in custody, facing justice. The evidence would form the foundation of federal prosecutions that would unfold over the coming years, dismantling what remained of Moreno's network and holding accountable those who had enabled his operations. Moreno was extradited to the United States on June 3, 2025. He was flown under guard to El Paso, where he made his initial appearance in federal court before Magistrate Judge Patricia Ornelas. The courtroom was packed with victims' families, federal agents, prosecutors, and media. Moreno, dressed in a dark suit, showed no emotion as the charges were read: racketeering conspiracy, continuing criminal enterprise, murder for hire resulting in death, narcotics trafficking conspiracy, international money laundering conspiracy, and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. The prosecution outlined the scope of the case: a decade-long operation that had distributed 240 tons of narcotics, generated more than $500 million in proceeds, and resulted in at least 14 murders directly attributable to Moreno's orders. The defense entered a plea of not guilty. Bail was denied. Moreno was remanded to federal custody pending trial, held at a maximum security facility where he remains today, awaiting proceedings scheduled to begin in early 2026. The impact of Moreno's capture extended beyond a single case. The evidence seized from his compound triggered investigations into corruption within multiple agencies. The Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General opened inquiries into the Border Patrol agents and ICE officers identified in Moreno's ledgers. 3 agents were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. 2 resigned before charges could be filed. 1 was arrested and charged with bribery and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Municipal police departments in Albuquerque, Tucson, and El Paso launched internal affairs investigations that resulted in the suspension or termination of 7 officers. The revelations damaged public trust in institutions tasked with protecting communities from the very threats Moreno represented. The corruption had not just enabled a fugitive to evade capture. It had undermined the integrity of the systems designed to ensure accountability and justice. The international dimensions of the case highlighted the challenges of cross-border cooperation in combating transnational organized crime. Mexican authorities praised the operation as a model of bilateral coordination, but privately acknowledged the difficulties posed by cartel influence within Mexican law enforcement and government institutions. The fact that Moreno had operated openly in Puerto Vallarta for years protected by
Signatures
corrupted
alone were
local
enough to
police
activate or
and
shut down
insulated from
entire
federal
streams of
detection,
public money. Behind the
underscored
image of integrity
the
and
extent
discipline within the
to which
financial system
cartels
lay a
have
dark
infiltrated
secret. For
state
months,
and
federal
municipal
analysts
governments
noticed
in
something
regions
unusual.
they
Large budget
control.
adjustments
The
quietly
case prompted
occurring
discussions
again
within
and
both
again.
governments
Recipient
about
organizations that
strengthening
never expanded their
anti-corruption
operations,
mechanisms,
and
enhancing
temporary
intelligence
expenditures
sharing,
that stretched
and
on for
developing
years
joint
without a plan.
strategies to target
At the same
not just
time,
cartel
around the
operatives,
mansion appeared
but the
security
financial
teams
and
working and
political
vehicles arriving
infrastructure
at night and
that
leaving
sustains
before
their
dawn.
power.
The red warning
The
signs
capture of one
emerged. They
fugitive,
approved
however
or authorized
significant,
or adjusted
would not
under the
dismantle
label
the
of
cartels,
technical corrections.
but it demonstrated
Individually,
that
each amount
sustained
seemed
pressure,
harmless. Taken
international
together, they bent the
cooperation,
entire
and
budget,
commitment
pushing
to
hundreds of
accountability
millions of dollars
could
through routes
penetrate
that were
even
nearly
the
impossible to
most
trace.
secure
Truth. This was not a
cartel-safe
house.
havens.
It was a financial
For the
fortress
agents
and
and
was
analysts
issued.
who had
Inside the
dedicated
mansion,
years
the
to the
guards took their
investigation,
positions, ready to
Moreno's
defend the heads of a
capture
system
represented
built on money,
validation of their
paperwork,
persistence
and power.
belief
The
that
storm was
justice,
coming, and the
however
real crime
delayed,
did not
could
begin
be
with
achieved.
weapons. It began
Agent
years earlier,
Caroline
with
Driscoll,
numbers quietly
who had led
approved
the
in
task
silence.
force
You
from
have
its
only seen power
inception,
becomes a shield for
reflected
evil.
In a post-arrest
The deeper
briefing
investigators went, the
that the
clearer
case
the
had
truth
consumed
became.
a decade
Corruption did not crash
of her
into their
career
lives like a storm.
and the
It seeped
careers
in
of
quietly
dozens
into
of others.
every
The
number, every
sacrifices
memo,
had been
every
significant,
signature
time
placed
away
in
from
system.
families,
Mohammed
the
Douaili and
emotional
Nemo
toll
Ali
of witnessing
understood
the human
every
cost
corner
of
of it.
Moreno's
The budget
operations,
blind
the
spots, the
frustration
approval
of leads that
loopholes,
went
the weak
cold and
points no
operations that
audit
failed.
ever touched.
But
Instead of using
the
that
capture
knowledge to
affirmed a
protect the
principle
nation, they
that
exploited
guides law
it for
enforcement
personal
at its
gain,
best.
building one of the most
That no
dangerous
fugitive,
drug and human
regardless of
trafficking
resources,
networks
connections, or the
imaginable.
protection
Beneath
of
Minneapolis,
corrupt
they
systems
constructed a
is
hidden
beyond the
empire
reach
that
of
operated without
determined
interruption for
investigators willing
3
to
years,
pursue
quietly
justice
profiting
across
from the
borders and
public
years.
trust that once
The case
admired
would
them.
serve as a
To the
reminder
public,
to
they
other
embodied
fugitives on the
discipline
10
and
most
integrity.
wanted list
Behind
that the
closed doors,
FBI's
however,
memory
they
is
were
long
forming
and
alliances
its
the
resolve
United States
unshakable.
through illegal routes
The
from
families
Mexico.
of Moreno's victims received the news with mixed emotions. For Miguel Herrera, the capture brought a sense of closure tempered by the knowledge that his sister would never return. That justice achieved could not undo the loss. He attended Moreno's initial court appearance, sitting in the gallery, watching the man responsible for Christina's death stand before a judge. He described the experience as surreal, a moment he had waited for but never fully believed would come. Other families expressed similar sentiments. Relief that accountability was finally arriving, anger that it had taken so long, sorrow that no legal outcome could restore what had been taken. The trial, when it proceeds, will offer them a platform to confront Moreno, to ensure that the full scope of his crimes is documented and acknowledged, and to honor the memories of those whose lives were destroyed by his decisions. Comment no more if you believe corruption that protects killers must be dragged into the light and burned out of every institution. The case also forced a broader reckoning with the opioid and methamphetamine crisis fueled by networks like Moreno's. The 240 tons of narcotics his organization moved into the United States over 8 years contributed to an epidemic that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Communities across the Southwest and beyond have been ravaged by addiction, overdose deaths, and the social disintegration that accompanies widespread substance abuse. Moreno's capture removed one operator from the supply chain, but the demand remains, the cartels remain, and the flow of narcotics continues. Addressing the crisis requires not just law enforcement action, but comprehensive public health strategies, treatment resources, and efforts to reduce demand. The case serves as a stark reminder that criminal networks exploit societal vulnerabilities and that dismantling them requires solutions that extend beyond arrests and prosecutions. As Moreno awaits trial, the investigation continues. Prosecutors are building a case that will rely on the thousands of documents, communications, and financial records seized from his compound. Witnesses are being interviewed, cooperating defendants debriefed, and forensic evidence analyzed. The trial is expected to be one of the most significant organized crime prosecutions in recent years. A sprawling case that will expose the inner workings of a transnational cartel network and the corruption that sustained it. If convicted on all counts, Moreno faces multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The prosecution will seek to ensure that he spends the rest of his life in federal prison, a consequence commensurate with the scale of his crimes and the suffering he inflicted. The capture marks the end of a chapter, but not the end of the story. The fight against transnational organized crime is not one with a single arrest or a single prosecution. It is a sustained effort that requires vigilance, resources, and the courage to confront corruption wherever it exists. The agents who pursued Moreno for 10 years understand this. The families who lost loved ones to his violence understand this. The communities devastated by the narcotics he trafficked understand this. Moreno's capture is a victory, but it is one battle in a war that continues across borders, within institutions, and in neighborhoods where the consequences of cartel operations are felt most acutely. The networks are resilient. The cartels are adaptive. The corruption is deep. But the commitment to justice must be deeper. For those who watched Moreno's rise and fall, the case offers lessons about the nature of power, the vulnerability of institutions, and the capacity of individuals to inflict immense harm when unchecked by accountability. Moreno was not born a monster. He was a product of systems that rewarded ruthlessness, environments that normalized violence, and structures that permitted corruption to flourish. His choices were his own, and he must be held accountable for them. But his story also reflects broader failures. Failures to address the conditions that give rise to criminal organizations. Failures to root out corruption that protects them. Failures to provide communities with alternatives to the allure of cartel money and power. Confronting those failures requires more than law enforcement. It requires political will, social investment, and a recognition that security and justice are inseparable from opportunity and dignity. The manhunt that ended in Puerto Vallarta began with a missing woman, a brother who refused to accept her disappearance, and investigators who believed that patterns of violence pointed to something larger. It expanded into an international operation that spanned a decade, cost millions of dollars, and required the coordination of agencies across 2 countries. It exposed corruption within institutions meant to uphold the law. It revealed the human cost of cartel operations with brutal clarity, and it demonstrated that persistence, cooperation, and commitment to accountability can penetrate even the most secure, criminal safe havens. Gabriel Moreno Vizquez is now in custody, facing justice for crimes that destroyed lives, shattered families, and poisoned communities. His capture will not end the cartels. It will not eliminate corruption. It will not solve the opioid crisis, but it sends a message that resonates across borders and within the criminal underworld. There is no safe haven secure enough, no network vast enough, no amount of money or corruption sufficient to place someone permanently beyond the reach of justice. Comment your thoughts below. Say what you really think about officials who betray their oaths and criminals who buy their protection. Hit like so this story escapes algorithms that bury uncomfortable truths about how deep corruption runs in institutions we trust. Share this with someone who still believes the system is incorruptible. They need to see what a decade-long manhunt uncovered. The fight continues, and it needs every person willing to demand accountability, transparency, and justice. Silence protects them. Awareness exposes them. Your engagement is how truth survives. This is only the beginning. The files seized from Moreno's compound have already triggered new investigations, new arrests, new revelations about the scope of cartel influence within systems meant to protect us. The networks are vast. The corruption runs deeper than one fugitive's ledger can fully expose. And somewhere, another operator is planning, another network is forming, another threat is evolving. The agents are watching. The investigations continue. And the demand for justice does not rest.